Welcome to the Hangry Games Arena, where today the author of What's Eating You and the host of the Hangry Games discusses the importance of finding your tipping point, the apex per se that created the environment for your emotional eating. We all have that moment in time that caused the emotional monster to step out of the cage and start wreaking havoc in our lives. Find out how to identify your tipping point and empower yourself to take control of your emotional eating once and for all. This podcast is produced and recorded at Open Space Studios.
Well, hello, my Hangry Game Nation. How you doing? It's so nice to be here. This is actually, I'm excited to be here to empower those that are just absolutely sick and tired of their emotions, taking control of their overall wellness and their ability just to kind of achieve long-term weight loss. Now, I'm going to talk to you a lot like I talk to my patients. I'm going to teach in terms that I understand because I think that's just easier for people to get. I want you to kind of think of me like, kind of like the Joe Rogan of weight loss or maybe the Medea of weight loss, whatever you think. Some people are going to love what I have to say. Some people are not, and that's okay because we all have the opportunity to have our own opinions, right? That's right. Now, my code name at work is the Queen of Analogies. And the reason for that is because I basically teach in terms that you understand. So some of the things I'm going to talk about, I'm going to give you examples and things like that. And hopefully it kind of sticks, right? Because you want some stick-to-itiveness. That's a word. It's a word. Okay. All right. So since this is my very first podcast, I know, right? And I was like, the publicist was like, you should do a podcast. And I'm like, nah, okay. I don't even listen to podcasts. But I'm like, okay, did my homework, listened to a few podcasts. And I'm like, yeah, I think I can do this. I mean, I can talk forever. So I think we'll be good. If we run out of things to say, I'll just come up with some stuff. Good? All right, great. So just to kind of get started, I want to introduce myself, provide a little bit of professional background, and maybe a little bit about my personal testimony, just to kind of start the podcast. We're going to talk about a lot of different topics on the Hangry Games, but I did want you to kind of know where I'm coming from so that you have a better understanding about why I'm so passionate about what I do. I started writing the What's Eating You book and developed the Prep For It steps because of the fact that I dealt with emotional eating in my life, and we're gonna talk a little bit about that in a second. But it all changed when my brother was killed in 2006, and I'm going to talk a little bit more about that later. Not to put like a big damper on anything, but that's part of what got me here. And so I want to make sure that I do let my readers and viewers know a little bit more about it. So I've been a registered nurse for 33 OMG years. I mean, when I say that out loud, I'm like, oh my God, that's so long. It does freak me out a little bit. But and then I've been a women's health nurse practitioner for probably it's almost 18 years. Out of those 18 years, I've never been in a different clinic. I've worked at Center for Women's Health in Covington, Louisiana with Dr. Catherine Williams. And probably 3 years into my practice, I wanted to become kind of like an expert in a certain field. And I really did have a passion for PCOS. We went to a conference and it was very enlightening and I was very enthusiastic. I think I got bit by the bug right at that moment. And I started doing a lot of research and stuff, and I became an expert in the area per se on PCOS, which is polycystic ovarian syndrome, on insulin resistance, and on all kind of other metabolic disorders. And so, fast forward, I've been doing that for probably about 15 years now. And approximately 2 years ago, I went back to school a little bit. It was more informal training, but about 120 hours of obesity medicine and some advanced training. And so really outside of talking about, menopause and some other women's issues and stuff like that, the majority of the conversations that I have in my clinic on a day-to-day basis is on weight loss. It's what the potential triggers are, opportunities for successful management. And a lot of this includes, it includes medications, which is usually what they come in to see me for. It includes the eating plan and the exercise. It really includes all three. And so we're going to talk a little bit about that. My professional and to a degree, my personal passion did start to develop when I became an emotional eater. And like I said, a lot of that stemmed from my brother's death in 2006. So that's the tip of the iceberg. So let's hit the water and go a little bit deeper, okay? So you have to kind of figure out what got you there. What is your tipping point? And I want to spend a few minutes talking about this personal testimony because I think it's very important, because at the end of this podcast, we're going to have a conversation about some take-homes that you're going to be working on, and this is going to be one of them that we're going to talk about. But, let's go back in time. So overall, I've been a very athletic individual. I played volleyball in high school, in college. I was very competitive. I would try to beat you at tiddlywinks. Now, some of you younger people don't even know what that is, but that's okay. But I mean, I literally would want to beat you in anything that we played. So I was very competitive. I maintained a very fit lifestyle, very healthy eating. You had to. You were playing collegiate sports. And don't get me wrong. I mean, we would have that Saturday night, you just finished clubbing a little doot. And then you had to show up at Taco Bell at 3:00 in the morning for your enchilada, right? I mean, look, I had those days. I know all about those days. But of course, when you're 18 years old, you can blink and you could lose weight. So it doesn't always work that way. But the overall dietary theme for me at that time, I was very structured. My meal choices were very structured. I was eating very, very healthy food options, portions, very, very high impact exercise. And during that time, I didn't have a worry in the world. Nothing. I could eat whatever I wanted. I'd work out. If I gained a few pounds, I would just avoid a few hot tamale candies and bump up my exercise a little bit. And then boom, I just dropped a few pounds in the next day. And it really wasn't until July 6th of 2006 that my life would be forever changed. And I have to believe that you guys, my listeners and my viewers, likely have been impacted by a life-altering event as well. It was a typical day in the office. We were just finishing up with patients, and I don't usually keep my phone with me when I'm in the office. I may have it on the side, but I don't really look at it. And I happened to look down at it at the end of the day, and I had several missed calls from my mother. So obviously, you got to call your mom back. So I called mom back, and that's when she told me my brother had been struck by lightning. He was on a softball field practicing, and that they had brought him to the hospital immediately, and that he was in critical condition. You need to come in immediately. And up to this point, we never in our life had a traumatic event, ever. Our family members lived to their 98, 101. I mean, nobody had anything that was this significant occur. So it was something that was just, for all of us, very stressful, very traumatic. But I was the only one in the family that had medical background. So I get to the hospital, and I do have kind of a one-on-one with the doctor. And he told me my brother was having what's called multi-system organ failure. And that's pretty much when all of those organs are fighting to even just maintain a normal survival. And they all just kind of, it's like a domino effect. One system starts working, acting up, and then the next system starts acting up, and then they all kind of start failing, and basically that's what was happening. And he told me that he didn't think my brother would live to see the morning. And, I understood the magnitude of what that meant from a medical perspective, also believed that God would do something mighty through that. And he did. He did so many amazing things. But within 24 hours, my brother had a massive heart attack. It was just from all of the electrical damage that occurred when he was struck. And he died at 30 years of age. It was at that moment that I became an emotional eater, at that moment. Now, I didn't blow up like a balloon in a month. I mean, I didn't. It was just a very slow, very deceptive process. And I like to use the analogy, and I'd use this analogy in the book, and it's called the emotional monster. And I imagine, in order for me to understand things and to teach, I want to see it as a visual in my head, which probably could be scary for some people, but for me, not so much. Anyway, I imagine this emotional monster like one of those big blue furry monsters from like one of the phone commercials. Okay. You may look at them forever different from now on, but I look at it like that. And I've literally just given him the key to the cage. He's just letting himself out. He's doing a little bit of stretching, and then he literally is getting ready to just wreak havoc in my life. And so, after making the funeral arrangements, and family dynamics are what they are, so that plays another role in processing the whole thing. And the wake, the funeral procession, the family gathering afterwards. When I got home, I was stunned. I was dazed. I was very, very numb. And like I said before, this does not happen overnight. This is a very slow process, and there's a lot of things that happen in that process. The grief that I felt was so overwhelming, and so you just start seeking love in all the wrong places. You got that right. I went to that pantry and I picked me up some Whoppers and some hot tamales and started eating some candy. And I mean, that's really that's the love. But anyway, I would go upstairs to the media room. And I would eat. I would keep boxes of nostalgic candy up in the media room so that when we'd have a movie night, I would have like Whoppers and hot tamales and Reese's Pieces and all those really cool things, and we would have them, to watch a movie. I would go up there. I wouldn't watch a movie, and I would eat a whole box of candy. One box became 2, which eventually became probably 20 over time. It was my comfort. It was my peace. It made me feel like I was in control. And it was helping me to control a very extreme emotion that I was having. I'm like, you know what I'm saying? What the heck? Y'all, this is a very, very steep slope that when you start sliding, it's very, very hard to catch on a route and stop yourself from going all the way down. And it doesn't have to be the loss of a loved one, like in my case. It could be a stressful job. It could be divorce, a significant family dynamic, maybe a personal illness. It could really be anything that becomes your tipping point, okay? Anything that's a significant trigger for you. The biggest issue with emotional eating, and the way that I say this, is it's triggered by one extreme emotion. So I'm going to give myself as an example. So for me, I had significant extreme grief. And so what I did was I ate comfort foods because that helped me to cope with that extreme emotion. And it did. I felt like I had some control. The problem with that is when you emotionally eat for an extreme emotion, one particular emotion, the body develops a compensatory mechanism. And so what happens is every extreme emotion you have now, you have the same type of reaction. For instance, oh my gosh, I'm super happy. Let's go do sushi. I am so frustrated. I'm getting my Frappuccino. I deserve it. Horrible day. I'm so sad. Can you introduce me to your friend Ben and Jerry's? Do you see what I'm saying? So what I started out doing in eating for grief became eating for stress. I'm looking for a cookie, eating for anger. Any of those things elicited the same response. And don't get me wrong. I'm going to tell you something. A lot of times I'll talk to patients and I'll say, do you have any emotional eating? And they're like, no. I'm like, okay. And then I'll ask them, I'm like, well, what do you do when you're bored at home? And they're like, oh, well, yeah, I kind of eat a lot when I'm bored. And I'm like, are you bored a lot? Well, I kind of am. And I'm like, hello. Boredom is one of those emotions that's just kind of it's stealthy. And it doesn't, you don't think that you're doing anything wrong because you're just bored. And the fact of the matter is that emotion can elicit the same responses in all those other emotions, if that makes sense. I do have an example in the book that I want to refer to because it's a little bit of a different context, but it has the same result. I had a patient that one time came into the office. She was coming in for a well visit, and we were just having a conversation. At the end of the conversation, she's like, you're going to need to write me a prescription for Adipex. And I'm like thinking, quick answer, no. I don't even know, what kind of, weight gain have you had? What have you been doing? What have you not been doing? I don't know anything about you right at this point, So I'm like, let's, we're not just going to put a little Band-Aid on this. Let's talk a little bit about this. First question I asked her is, are you emotionally eating? And this is the answer I got. It was and I think you'll pick it up in my voice. It was like, no. And I'm like, okay. And I asked, do you have any alcohol intake? And she said, well, yeah. And we live in South Louisiana. I mean, you gotta understand that's pretty much a given on the patient history. So when I said, how much alcohol do you have, in a week or a month or what have you? And she said, well, I think I drink about 1 to 2 glasses of wine a night. Now, side note here. If you are drinking alcohol, it is like a liquid Snicker bar. So if you're drinking this every night before you go to bed, it is going to do the same thing to your body that candy would or anything else would, okay? And so your body is not going to do anything to process. It's not going to do anything to break it down. It is literally going to absorb it. It is a simple sugar. So it is a sugar, even though they tell you the white is better or whatever. I'm going to tell you it is liquid Snicker bar. All right, back to the story. So I looked at her vital signs, and based on her history, she had gained the majority of her weight about 2 years prior to that visit. So I said, okay, you've been drinking wine every night for about 2 years. And so I looked at her and I said, did something happen 2 years ago? And she goes like, what do you mean? I'm like, did something big or something significant happen 2 years ago when this all started? And I'm going to be honest with you. I literally, I'm not joking. She was so stunned, and I literally could have knocked her over with a feather. She just sat there and almost wanted to lean forward and just push her, her bottom lip back up. She was like, it was like that was her aha moment. That was where she realized, oh my gosh, I am doing this. And she said, and this is all she said, this was the game changer right here. She said, my house flooded. That's when my house flooded. We lost everything. And what was really cool about that whole thing, not that in and of itself is cool, but she did say, she goes, you know what? That is when I started drinking nightly. And she never asked me for Adipex after that. She literally walked out the door, and it was like she had the aha moment. She understood. And it was like it was a game changer for her. And it's when the moment you realize that the emotional monster is running around in your head, and he's trying to play, hide and seek. And when you figure out what he's doing, that is when you have the most power and the biggest chance to make a change. That's when you have it, is when you have the aha moment. This super stressful event for her, it was very overwhelming for her. And she did, instead of reaching out for food like I did, she just reached out to alcohol. But again, same result, right? And look, you might think you're actually immune to this. And if you do, kudos to you. Thumbs up. Great job for you. But here's what I'm going to say. I'm going to say a few things. COVID. Prolonged pandemic that still hasn't ended. A loss of a loved one. A spouse that is now cheating on you, a child that is now addicted to drugs, a job that is literally trying to squeeze the last little bit of blood from the proverbial turnip, attempting to get an advanced degree or step out of those normal everyday steps that you would normally do, financial bankruptcy or hardship. Does any of this sound familiar? Because these are life-changing events. These are things that have the potential to trigger emotional eating in your life. The first step here, the really most important step, is that aha moment. What do I mean by that? I'm like, oh, I get it now. Or it's like, oh no. It's like you're all the way down, and the only way you can go is up. And that happened for me. I was actually at my boss's condo and it was a condo on the marina. And I'm like, I'm in the bathroom getting my bath done, all that stuff. And I see it's just a little small scale over to the corner of the room. I'm like, never weigh myself. I'm just like, let me just tell you, see me in scrubs today. This is usually my attire for seeing patients, and scrubs are very deceiving. you're fine until you're not fine. And if you don't fit in your scrubs, you're in a heap of trouble already. And I stepped on the scale and I was like, I was so dumbfounded. I had never seen that before. And I didn't even realize I had a problem. I thought everything was okay. And so I headed out to the living room, and I don't think I came up for air. Probably for a good half an hour. I had a conversation with my husband, and I don't know if he got a couple of words in. He probably didn't. And I literally just was like vomiting just all of this information, just vomiting all this stuff that's been bubbling up and staying inside. And that's actually where Prep For It Steps was birthed there, is because I realized I had to go back to what worked for me in the past. I had to go back to what was a game changer for me in the past that I could sustain for a long period of time. And that's really what you got to get to. It was my wake-up call, and that's what you need to do. You need to have a wake-up call. You need to have the aha moment. You need to have that call to fight kind of thing, and the glass check moment, really. And I really do strongly encourage you to sit down. In the next few days, I want you to sit down. I don't want the kids to be bugging you, asking you what's for dinner and all this other hot mess. And don't do it when you're going to pick somebody up or drop somebody off. Literally, sit down, quiet, no social media, no phones, nothing, no TV. Just sit down and think about, do I have some emotional triggers that have caused me to comfort eat, that have started initiating this vicious cycle that I unfortunately don't have the ability to stop? And I really do want you to take that time to really think about it. And then I want you to write your testimony down. I want you to put it, if you can fit it on a sticky note, great. If not, put it on several sticky notes. I don't care. And I want you to put that on your mirror. I want you to see it every day. I want you to reflect on it regularly for a little while, because that has to drive your decisions for long-term wellness and weight loss. Okay. Now, I'm not wanting you to put it on your mirror so that you can head over to the pantry for some ding dongs. Okay. That's not why we're doing this. What we're doing is we're trying to that call to fight, that wake up call, that thing that's going to make you, okay, Kelly, I got to do this. There's no other way to do this, and now is the time. I want you to identify that you do have an elephant in the room, okay, or in this case, an emotional monster, and we need to take one bite at a time, and that does take time, and you are going to do it. What I can tell you is that once you do identify that you have an emotional trigger, once you identify that this emotional monster has been, basically doing a happy dance in your brain for however long that is, it is a very enlightening feeling, and it's a very empowering feeling, and it can fuel a lot of your decisions and a lot of your the things that are going to create the success for you down the line with this. And so you need to find that. And this is, I think that when we can identify the first trigger, now we know that all the other emotions are going to create the same thing. But when you figure out what the first trigger is, and you can kind of maybe come to terms with that, and that took a little while for me because obviously it was grief, it was the loss of my brother. But when you can come to terms with that first trigger, everything else becomes a little bit easier to manage. And I do talk a little bit more about this in the book. I do talk about some being proactive things and some things like that with the Prep For It steps. But this is a good start for you. Figure out what got you here. Figure out what's underneath the water, because you just see the tip of the iceberg right now. What is so crazy is I am literally out of time. I literally did not come up for air, and I did not even take a sip of water. That is just absolutely crazy. This was actually a lot of fun. Thank you so much for tuning in today. I cannot wait to hang out with you again, with you guys next week. I would love some feedback. Please make sure to head over to prepforit.com. Just to do a little bit of blogging with me, just to let me know, hey, these are some topics I'm thinking about in the future. I would love to hear about this, Kelly. Those are some things that would be really awesome. Next week, we're going to talk about what is the best diet or eating plan on the market today. So you don't want to miss that episode, because I think this is going to be very It's going to be a lot of fun. I am going to do the good, the bad, and the ugly. I am going to probably chop these guys up a little bit. So it's going to be some fun. I do have some takeaways. I do want you to work on some things. So remember, homework, I need you to reflect, write your testimony down. I want you to plan on eating the elephant, or in this case, the emotional monster, one bite at a time. Please make sure to like our podcast, to subscribe so you'll know when the new ones are coming out and stuff, and just stay connected. We put the prepforit.com website out there because we really wanted a place for people to get, I want you to be empowered. I want you to have a place where you feel like there is a nation of people behind you trying to help you to succeed and reach your goals. We have a free workbook, we have resources, recipes, we have an essentials video. We've got a lot of great stuff there. So I cannot wait to see you next time. Until then, we are out. And please make sure to figure out what your aha moment, get that aha moment, find out what that tipping point is and get that aha moment. Okay. All right. I'll see you soon.